right, hello everyone. My name is Katie Endel. I am a registered kinesiologist, and I'm very excited to be here today to talk to all of you about falls and how we can work to prevent, manage, and recover from them. So as Robin said, I am also the owner of Achieving Motion, where I work with those living with Parkinson's to maintain their balance, strength, memory, and more, with that goal of adding years to their life and life to their years. So let's just quickly talk about what we're going to learn by the end of this webinar. So we are going to look at what the 4 stages of falls are and why each is important to address with exercise. We're also going to look at how to fall in a way that reduces the risk of serious injury, as well as various ways to get up from a fall if that should occur. I am going to have a few questions throughout our presentation today. These are more just questions for you to sort of contemplate to yourself. Don't need to unmute and answer these or answer them in the chat, just contemplation questions. So the first couple, have you heard of the term falls prevention? And have you heard of the term falls preparedness? So I'm going to assume that most, if not all of you have heard the term falls prevention, because if not, you probably wouldn't have signed up for today's webinar. So falls prevention, that is a term referring to work to prevent ending up on the ground or the floor unexpectedly. This term falls preparedness is a term that's much less well known, but very important. And so we're going to be learning about that today. A good part of our presentation is going to be focused on this. So another question for you to contemplate: if you were to fall, are you confident that you would be able to get back up without the assistance of others? So I do not bring this up to create any fear. I want to bring it up to create awareness, because falls can happen to anyone and they can happen at any time. Unfortunately, our society has created this stereotypical image of someone who falls or is at a high risk for falls, and it looks like a frail older adult who maybe has that hunched forward posture, walks slowly, maybe uses a cane or a walker for balance. And unfortunately, that image is just, it's not helping for a few different reasons. First of all, if that is the health condition you're in, it creates a lot of shame, and we don't want that. There, you do not need to feel shame. But the second reason is because if we don't identify with that image, we think, okay, falls aren't going to happen to me. I don't need to worry about this. I don't need to address this. Just that ignorance is bliss sort of mindset. But the problem with that is that if we then have a fall, because again, they can happen to anyone, we're not as prepared and we're not as resilient and able to handle it, again, without serious injury, or possibly being able to get back up. So we are going to really focus on that preparedness piece today. So when we think about falls, there are 4 stages of a fall, and they can be grouped into 2 different categories. And those categories are falls prevention and falls preparedness. Falls prevention consists of the stages before a fall occurs, and those are pre-fall and near fall. Falls preparedness consists of the stages during and after a fall occurs, which are falling and fall recovery. Because of the progressive nature of Parkinson's disease, and even just the difference between on and off periods, good and bad days, focusing solely on the prevention piece is not enough to truly keep you safe. So we are going to look at each stage a bit more in depth. So we'll start with that pre-fall stage. This is the stage before a loss of balance occurs. Why it's important to focus on this stage is because it helps us maintain and improve our balance to hopefully reduce the chances of a fall happening. What you'll commonly see in many traditional fall prevention programs, especially programs that are out in a community setting, maybe like a hall or a church, something like that, is that this stage is the focus of those programs. And while it's an important stage, it's only one of four. And so we're missing pieces of the puzzle if we're only focusing on this stage. What we also commonly see is that there's a focus on what we call static balance exercises. So these are exercises where you're trying to maintain your balance while you're standing in one position. So this image here is an example of that. She's just standing in one spot, standing on one foot. Another example could be if you are standing with one foot in front of the other, like you're on a tightrope and you're just trying to hold there and maintain your balance. The problem is these exercises on their own aren't necessarily the most effective way at preventing falls, and that's because they don't really mimic real life scenarios that well. So a lot of falls happen when people are moving, when they are navigating their environment, or when they're distracted or trying to do multiple things at once. So what we could be doing better when we think about our exercises for this pre-fall stage is adding in what we call dynamic balance exercises. And so those are balance exercises when we're moving. So when we're walking, when we're stepping in different directions, things like that. And then we also want to bring in some balance challenges that challenge our attention. So that try and distract us from focusing on just our balance, or that maybe force us to do multiple things at once. And so those are going to better replicate the situations where most falls occur to gain our skills to handle those situations and reduce the chances of a fall. The next thing, we can make our balance exercises more fun. If you have tried to improve your balance by standing on one leg for weeks or months on end, I'm going to assume that that got a little bit boring for you. And unfortunately, if our exercises are boring, our motivation goes down and we're less likely to stick to it. And as I'm sure most of you know, motivation itself is affected by Parkinson's disease. So when you've already got that, plus not very exciting balance exercises, it's going to be that much harder to stick with it. And we have to be doing our exercises consistently to truly see a difference and see the benefits from them. So there are ways to make your balance exercises more fun and add variety to hopefully increase the chances that you stick with it. And then the last thing that we want to ensure that we're doing is safely pushing to the limits of our balance. When we're doing balance exercises, especially, if you're doing them on your own, we tend to pick things that we're a little bit better at. We try and avoid the things that are harder, even though they're usually the things that are the best for us. If you've heard the phrase, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you, that does apply to your balance exercises. So when you're doing your balance exercises, you want to be feeling a little bit wobbly, like you might have to put a hand on a chair or a wall for a bit of balance support, or maybe even just take a step every once in a while to kind of reset and then try again. If you're doing a balance exercise where you can hold it for more than 20, 30 seconds without having to touch a hand or a foot down, I hate to burst your bubble, but it's probably not actually challenging enough for you to really see the benefits that you think you are to improve your balance and reduce the chances of falls. So we want to do this safely, of course, but we do need to push to those limits of balance. So when we think about our exercise program and what exercises to include, we want to include both static and dynamic balance exercises. We want to include something called amplitude training, which is just working on emphasizing big movements, which is particularly important for exercise for Parkinson's disease, because as the disease progresses, our movements can get slower and smaller. So we want to include that amplitude training to keep those movements big. We want to be working on strength because strong legs, strong ankles help maintain your balance. Your core strength, for example, helps keep you steady. That's sort of your foundation. And then we also want to include cognitive training. You might have heard this referred to as dual task training as well, because that's going to help mimic those situations where you're distracted or multitasking. So a couple examples of exercises you could do for your pre-fall stage are lunges, as if you were bending down to tie your shoe. You could do a step up with a reach, as if you were having to get something from a tall shelf. And if you're short like me, you need to use a step stool to do that. If anyone was at the fall conference, the podium incident, you know what I'm talking about. You know how short I am. So those are two examples for this stage where we're strengthening your legs and working on your balance in an activity that translates better to a real life activity you might be doing. An example of a dynamic balance exercise could just be walking while you are turning your head left and right. This is going to help us keep the skill of balancing while our head and our eyes are moving, which those movements throw off your balance. And so this could help with if you're walking with somebody and you're trying to talk, look at them while you talk and walk. It could be just walking, and if something like a siren catches your attention, our instinct is to look to where that noise came from, and that will help us be able to do that without losing our balance. So I'm not going to dive too deep into the cognitive training, dual task training exercises today. If you're at the fall conference, you should have a better understanding of this, since this is what I presented on there. But I'm going to give you just a brief overview. So dual task exercises are doing two or more things at once. So this is an example here. Oh, notice there's colored cones on the ground around my client here. And then the TV is flashing a number with the colored background. So she needs to step to the color that she sees, and then the number tells her if she's doing a squat or a bicep curl when she gets there. So we're working on a few different things here. On the physical side of things, we are working on her strength because we're doing squats and bicep curls. We're working on dynamic balance because now she has to maintain her balance while she's stepping in different directions, while she's turning. And we're working on amplitude because she's taking big steps to those cones. And then on the cognitive side, we're working on her attention so she can stay focused, her working memory so she can remember the rules of the activity, as well as her reaction time. And reaction time is going to be important for preventing falls, and we'll get to that in just a second. So again, just contemplate this. If you trip, do you think you could catch yourself? So we'll move on to the near fall stage. And this is the stage where we practice skills that help us catch ourselves if we slip, trip, stumble, kind of like in this little video here. This hiker trips on something, but they're able to get a foot and a hand out to catch themselves and prevent fall. What we commonly see with this stage is that it's not always included in more traditional falls prevention programs. If it is, the limits of balance aren't always approached. And as we already discussed, that is important. We want to do that to truly see the benefits of these types of exercises. And sometimes there's valid reasons for that. Sometimes there's safety concerns, just equipment, like lack of equipment if it's out again in a community setting versus like a clinic setting. So there are reasons for that. But if you are in a program where we're not really addressing these things, I do encourage you to seek out maybe a one-on-one exercise professional that you can go to fit in these pieces of the puzzles to make sure you're getting a well-rounded exercise program for everything that we're going to talk about today. So what can we do better? Again, we can push to those balance limits in a safe way. And we also want to focus on speed. So if we trip, we need to take a quick, sturdy step to catch ourselves. So we need to maintain our speed. And You've probably heard that muscle mass or strength declines as we age, which is true, but our speed, our ability to generate that strength quickly actually declines even faster than just muscle strength itself. So we need to work on the speed and power training, we call it, so that we can continue to react and move quickly enough to catch ourselves if we start to fall. So for our exercise programming, we want to include working on stepping in all different directions. There's a few things I'm going to mention today that you probably don't consider a skill, because at one time it was probably something you could do without thinking and you had the balance and control to do so. But maybe you're at a point now where you've noticed, okay, that's a little bit more challenging than it used to be. And so those types of activities I consider a skill, even though they're not traditionally thought of as a skill. And one of those things is your ability to step in different directions with balance and control. As we get older, when we stop running around with our friends, when we stop playing sports, we really just move in a forward direction most of the time. And so then when we have to go backwards or side to side, it can end up being a bit more challenging than it used to. So we really want to work on moving in all different directions to maintain that skill, because you are not necessarily always going to fall forward. We also want to work on reaction time training. Again, that's a piece of that cognitive training, because you need to react quickly in these situations to be able to prevent a fall and catch yourself. Amplitude training, because again, big step, speed, we have already talked about that. If you are someone who experiences freezing of gait, it can also be important to work with an exercise professional who can help you choose exercises targeted at freezing of gait to help manage that, because that symptom does increase your risk of falls. So a few exercise examples here. I'm going to show you a video of one in just a second, but stepping in different directions. Things like just doing quick squats. So squats as quick as you can, little jumps if that's comfortable for you, fast walking, those types of activities can be very helpful for this stage. One other thing that can be helpful for this stage is something called perturbation training. And I do not expect you to have heard of this before. This is basically where an external force, like a nudge, is put on you, and you need to counteract that to maintain or recover your balance. So if you have ever seen videos of a participant in a harness standing on a platform, and there's somebody who's sort of pushing and pulling that platform to intentionally throw that person off their balance so that they have to take a step and recover, that is an example of this. That is a really effective tool. However, it's not widely used just because of like issues with staffing, space, equipment. So a couple other ways we can do this, and it is more so done in a one-on-one setting than a instructor to a big group. But another way we can do this is sometimes with my clients, I'll stand behind them when they're doing a balance exercise and just give them little nudges from different directions. And because I'm behind them, they don't know which direction it's going to come from. And so they need to counteract and maintain their balance while they're experiencing those external forces. This image here is actually an example of perturbation training, because the water in this jug is going to slosh around as this gentleman is walking. And so that movement of the water is creating like pushing and pulling forces on him that he's going to need to counteract and keep his balance while he's moving. And even more so with this example, because this jug is on a string, that whole jug is going to sway and try and throw his balance off. So that's an example of perturbation training that you can even just try at home. Just pick up a jug of water and try and walk with it and maintain your balance. Hopefully that made sense. So this is an example of a cognitive exercise for the near fall category. So the TV is flashing arrows up, down, left, or right. And then I am taking big steps in the direction of the arrow over the hurdles. This is an exercise I do with a lot of my clients. And you can easily do this type of thing at home. Just take away the hurdles, just take big steps in different directions. Bonus points if you have somebody at home that can call out front, back, left, right, and then you need to move, because then that brings in the reaction time training we've talked about. So that covers the falls prevention side of things. We are now going to switch over to the falls preparedness side. And the first stage of falls preparedness is falling. Now, I know that this is a sensitive topic for many people because many people are afraid of falls, which is a very valid fear. The problem I often see is that because it's a fear, we just don't want to think about it. So, as I mentioned earlier, that ignorance is bliss mindset. We don't want to think about it. We're happier if we don't pay attention to that. The problem is, as I've already mentioned a few times, falls can happen to anyone. And if we don't think about it, we're less prepared and less resilient to handle it if it should occur. So I firmly believe that we do need to talk about this, even if it's a bit of a scary topic, so that we can work to feel more prepared and then reduce that overall fear of falling, because fear of falling is itself a risk factor for falls. So this stage is important so that we can know how to fall in a way that reduces the risk of serious injury. Unfortunately, in more traditional falls prevention programs, this is rarely, sometimes never, talked about. It could be talked about by the instructor, maybe even demonstrated, which is fantastic, but it's very rarely actually practiced by participants. Again, unless you're in more of a clinic specialized setting. And we do want to change that so that we can be more prepared. So I'm going to play a video here that is going to look at how to fall in a way to reduce the risk of serious injury. But before I start it, just a couple things I want you to consider. If you are falling, these are the three big things I want you to try and remember. So number one, always, always protect your head. Do your best to prevent your head from hitting the ground, okay? The second is we want to land on as big of a surface area as possible. So that is going to help prevent serious injury, because now you're distributing like the blow or the impact of that fall over a bigger area. It's not just one small point, like for example, your wrist taking all of that impact, which is going to increase the chances of having a major injury to that area. So try and land on as big of a surface area as possible. And then the third thing, which actually is probably going to seem counterintuitive to many of you, is to allow the fall to happen. Don't try and stop it. When we fall, our instinct is to put our hands out, try and break the fall. But if we try and break our fall, that's actually what usually causes more of the serious injuries than if we just allow the fall to happen and come to that natural stop once the fall is complete. In this video, we are going to look at different strategies we can use to reduce the likelihood of serious injury if we experience a fall. If we experience a fall, yes, there is a good chance you might have some bruises, some bumps, some achiness, but we would rather that than something more serious like a fractured wrist, a fractured hip, things that could lead to hospital visits. So we will look at strategies falling backwards, sideways, and to the front. So we're going to start falling backwards. And with each of these techniques, I'm going to show you kind of in slow motion and then in full speed. So when we're thinking about falling backwards, what I want you to think about is trying to stick your bum out, almost coming into this crouching position so that we can get lower to the ground. And then we're going to, as soon as our bum hits the ground, we are going to roll backwards onto our back. And now the first technique we're going to look at is keeping our hands on our head to protect our head. But another technique you can use, especially if you're falling quickly and it feels like your momentum is going to keep taking you, maybe even backward somersault. While you're rolling backwards, you are going to straighten out your arms to the side and slap your arms down to the ground, keeping your chin tucked to protect your head. And that is going to act like a brake and stop you from going any further, okay? Now, We're not putting our hands behind us to brace ourselves because that's going to increase the likelihood of a broken wrist. Our arms are straight out to the side, slapping the ground, okay? So I'm going to show you the first one where I'm rolling, holding my head first, and then we'll do the slap. So I'm falling backwards. So getting your bum down and then immediately letting yourself roll onto your back. The next one, slapping those arms out to the side. So if you're falling backwards, okay, so trying to push your bum down so you can get lower to the ground instead of staying tall and falling flat on your back, and then slapping those arms to the side to create that braking force for you. Next, we're going to look at falling sideways. Our instinct is going to be to try and put one hand down to break our fall. We want to avoid that because, again, it's going to put a lot of pressure on our wrist and increase the likelihood of a broken wrist. So instead, what we're going to think about doing is trying to come down, not landing directly on your knee, but more so the side of your knee, and then you're immediately coming down onto the rest of your leg, and then keeping those elbows tucked instead of extending an arm. We're going to roll onto our side, okay? Now, you may stop there, but you also could use the technique we just looked at, falling backwards, where you roll onto your back and then slap those arms out to the side, okay? So let me show you this at a faster speed. Okay, so falling sideways. And then you may even, like I said, roll onto your back, stretch those arms out. So we're falling, again, kind of in slow motion here, trying to get that leg down and then immediately dropping onto our sides, keeping your head tucked so that we distribute that blow throughout the entire side of our body, not just on our wrist, not just on our hip. Now, when we think about falling forward, there's a couple different things we can try here. The first is actually to use that sideways falling technique we just looked at. So if we're falling forward, if we can twist a little bit as we go and then use that sideways technique, okay? So again, as you're falling forward, if you are able to twist, and then you can use that sideways fall. Now, falls happen quite quickly. If you're not sure you're able to do that, that's okay. There's another option we have, and that's falling straight ahead. But we don't want to fall on outstretched arms. Again, it's going to increase the chances of a broken wrist, maybe a major injury to your shoulder. So instead, what we're going to do is we're going to think about coming down onto our knees, and then immediately keep your arms bent, immediately dropping down onto your forearms, keeping your head either lifted, or you can look sideways so that you reduce the chance of your nose, your face hitting the ground, okay? So let me show you that in real speed. So maybe we've tripped, we're falling forward, knees, and then down onto our forearms, okay? So these techniques are really important for us to practice. You don't need to start from a full falling position. You can work with an exercise professional. We can break these down, start lower to the floor, break them down step by step, slow motion, and then you work on getting more into the full speed and higher. But really important to practice these techniques and not overlook them. It is really important to try and practice these techniques. Again, you don't need to start with the full thing like I just demonstrated. There are ways we can kind of break these down into separate exercises that are a little bit more manageable at the start. But if you are thinking to yourself, even with the thought of breaking those down into smaller steps, I'm still not comfortable trying that. What I want you to at least consider is a technique called visualization. So our brains actually do not know the difference between something that is real and something that is vividly imagined. So if you're not comfortable trying these exercises, at least close your eyes and picture yourself using these techniques, because just doing that is going to help strengthen the pathways in your brain, from your brain to your body, that will help these become more like a reflex, so that hopefully it will just happen instinctively without you having to focus on it. There is a reason that high-level athletes, like Olympic athletes, use this technique as part of their training, And it's because it helps strengthen the pathways they need to improve their performance without physically training 24/7 and just completely wearing their bodies out. Okay. So if you're not comfortable trying it, at least try that visualization tool. When we think about our exercise program, if we're comfortable, we want to try adding in those safe falling progressions. But I also consider resistance training and power training, amplitude training as part of this stage. And that is because these types of exercises help maintain bone density and reduce the chances of a fracture, something that could lead to a hospital visit. So we also want to include things like using weights, stomping our feet, jumping, even like little hops if that's comfortable. All of those will also be beneficial to help reduce the risk of serious injury. So again, just something for you to contemplate. When was the last time you voluntarily got down onto the floor? Was it within the last week, within the last month, the last 6 months, the last year, or was it maybe over a year ago? Just take a second to think about that. So this is going to bring us to the final stage of falls, which is fall recovery. And this is really important because we do need to know how to get up safely and be able to get up safely. And knowing how and being able to are two very different things. You can watch videos, try and memorize like the strategies to get back up. That's great, but you might be surprised if you're not voluntarily getting yourself up and down from the ground already. You might be surprised at how much strength and energy it can take to get yourself up from the ground, especially if it's because you've had a fall, because that is a scary instance, and that the emotional side of it is going to make it feel even harder. So we do want to be practicing getting up from the ground, and that we are going to look at some videos for various methods on how to do that today. What we commonly see is that this might be discussed if you're in more of that community setting falls prevention program. The instructor might demonstrate, but it's not usually practiced, again, because of limitations, maybe safety concerns, client comfort levels, and just equipment. A lot of times those classes don't have the ability to put like mats and things on the floor to make this a little bit more comfortable. So again, if you're not already doing this and maybe you're not comfortable doing it at home on your own, I do encourage you to seek out an exercise professional that you can work with to help put this piece of the puzzle into your program. We're going to look at techniques to help us get up from a fall if we have a chair or another sturdy object nearby that we can use for assistance. So we are going to start lying on our back, bringing our arms out to the side. This technique is going to involve us rolling over from our back onto our stomach. So whichever direction you're going to be rolling towards, you want to bend your opposite leg. So I'm going to roll to my left. I'm bending my right knee. The arm that's on the same side as that bent knee, we are going to be keeping straight and coming up and over to help create some momentum to help us roll. And you might need me to even rock back and forth like this a few times to help create that momentum. And then when you're ready, come all the way over onto your stomach. And from our stomach, we're going to be trying to come up onto our hands and knees. And there's a couple different ways you can do this. So to start, if you have the strength, you can put your hands under your shoulders and push yourself up. Shift your bum back and then walk the hands back into this all fours position. Or you can, coming back to this position, start pushing mostly with one side so that you're almost in the side tilting position, and then bring one knee up, and then you can push with the other arm to help lift you up enough that you can get that other knee underneath you, okay? So a couple different options there for how you can get onto your hands and knees. Once you're in that position, you are going to crawl over to your support object. Bring your hands onto that object. And then whichever leg is stronger, you're going to be trying to bring that leg forward. Now, you might need to rock back and forth a few times to create some momentum. And then when you're ready, bring that stronger side forward. From this position, you're going to push through your hands and that stronger side to lift up and then bring that other foot forward. And you can slowly turn and then take a seat in your chair. Now, if you are not comfortable putting pressure through your knees like you would in that all fours position, there's a couple different strategies you can use. So one, we'll start the same way as our previous strategies, laying down, one knee bent, rolling over onto our stomach, and then tucking your toes. You're going to try and lift up your torso and then push your hips up to the ceiling and kind of walk your hands and feet in towards each other until you get to kind of this squatting position, and then walking your hands up your legs to come up to a tall standing position. The other method you could try is, if we're coming back to our back, instead of rolling all the way onto your stomach, you're going to try and just roll onto your side. So use that arm and leg to create that momentum, but just stop on your side. From here, bend both knees. That top arm, you're going to bring in close to your abs, and you're going to try and push up with that top arm until you can get that bottom arm underneath you. And then hopefully you can push yourself up to this position where both arms are straight. We're going to take that top leg, which hopefully in this position is going to be your stronger leg. So consider that. You might want to roll onto the side of your weaker leg, but take that top leg over, and then you may need to rock forward and back a bit to create some momentum here. But when you're ready, you're going to go forward and you're going to try and push through your hands and that foot to basically just twist so that your torso is now facing the ground with both feet on the ground, and then slowly stand yourself up to that tall standing position. Now we'll take a look at some strategies you can use to get up from a fall if you do not have a chair or something around that you can use for assistance. So starting on our back, arms out to the side, whichever way you are rolling, you're going to bend your opposite leg and take that opposite arm up and over to help create that momentum, rocking a few times if you need to, and then rolling over onto your stomach. Again, there's a couple different ways you can go from your stomach to all fours. You can push yourself up and shift your hips back, walk the hands back, or you can slightly bring your torso up, facing the knee that you want to bring forward, and then push through that other arm to lift and bring that other knee underneath you. Now, as soon as you're in this all fours position, again, we don't have an object to support us. We need to go right from the all fours up to standing. There's a couple different ways you can do this. So both are going to involve moving your stronger side first, and you might need to rock forward and back to create some momentum. The first strategy we're going to use is to bring that stronger side forward with our hands still on the floor. And again, you may need to rock forward and back to create some momentum here. But from this position, you're going to push through that stronger leg and your hands to lift up and try and bring that other leg forward. And then you can slowly walk your hands up your legs and come up into a standing position. Alternatively, once you're on your hands and knees, another strategy you can use is still rocking forward and back if you need to create that momentum, bringing your strong foot forward, but then standing tall through your torso in this half kneeling position, hands on your stronger side. Again, you can rock forward and up to create momentum if you need to, and then when you're ready, pushing through that front leg to come up to a tall standing position. Is you could keep the knee that is comfortable on the ground instead of keeping it lifted like I did in this video, so that you have a little bit of support there, and then the knee that's not comfortable kneeling is the one that you come up with first and try and push off of. So just another idea there that you can use. So that was a few different ways that we could get up from the ground. Hopefully that didn't overwhelm you. I wanted to give you more than just one option in case that option doesn't work for you. There are even more options than what we just saw, but I didn't want to throw them all at you and have you feel too overwhelmed. But regardless of which method you're using to get up, there's a few different things I want you to consider. In those videos, I did that quite quickly and more of like a quick, smooth movement from the ground up. But if you have a fall, you're probably going to be feeling a bit scared. So I do not want you to move right away. Once that you've stopped, just stop, take some deep breaths to try and calm yourself down, because trying to get up is going to be that much harder, as I already mentioned, if you're still feeling sort of that anxious, panicked feeling. So stop, take some deep breaths. Once you've calmed yourself down, just bring awareness to your body and do what I call a head to toe scan, just to see if anything does feel like maybe it was injured in a way that would prevent you from getting up at all, or getting up with maybe the method that you would typically use. And then the last thing is just to know that you absolutely could take, like, to pause at any point of that progression from the floor to standing tall, to rest, take more deep breaths if you need to. As I mentioned, this does involve a lot of strength and energy to get up, especially after a fall. So don't be afraid to take like the little breaks when you need to. It does not need to be this quick, smooth movement. You're going to look at, okay, let me just fast forward through these slides here. Okay, there we go. So for our fall recovery stage, what could be better is that if you actually practice these strategies, you don't just watch somebody else explain it. As I mentioned previously, because knowing how and being able to do it are two very different things. I also say here, practice various strategies, because if we only ever practice one strategy, if we do have a fall, maybe we have had a bit of an injury, or maybe just like the environment we're in, depending on what's around us, might make it hard to use the one strategy we've been practicing the most. So I do suggest having practiced a couple, just so that you have those extra tools in your toolbox if you need them, if that sort of preferred method isn't going to work for you. Okay. I also have here using enough load, and that refers to your strength training exercises. I sound like a broken record now, but it does involve a lot of strength to get up from a fall. So when we are doing our strength training exercises, we want to make sure we're using challenging weights, challenging resistance bands, because again, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. So if we're using weights and resistance bands that are, pretty easy, we're just kind of going through the motions without feeling any real effort, that is not going to be improving your strength. It actually might not even be maintaining your strength the way you think it is. So we do need to be using weights that are challenging enough to build our strength so that we can maintain this skill or regain it of getting down and up from the ground. So our exercise programs, we want to include practicing different ways to get up, transfers. So for example, just practicing lying on your back, rolling over onto your stomach, or going from your stomach onto all fours. Amplitude training, big movements can help with this. That arms out wide position, rolling over, is actually considered an amplitude move. Strength training, again, because that's going to help you have the ability to actually get yourself up. And then the last thing that I like to include for this stage is floor exercises. So whether that's a mobility exercise, a strength training exercise, if you are able to get down onto the floor, I highly encourage you to do some of your exercises in that position, because the more time we spend on the floor, the more comfortable we are there, the less scary it's going to feel if we end up there unexpectedly. And if you're not comfortable going down to the floor right now, that's okay. At least try and maybe do some of these exercises on your bed or a couch. And then as you get stronger, more comfortable, you can work your way down to a lower surface over time. So some example exercises for this stage could be things like lunges to help build that lower body strength, lunges, squats to get up from the floor. It could be a wall push-up, a push-up on a counter to help you have that strength to push your torso up from that lying on your stomach position. And then just different transfers, breaking down the steps of the getting up process. So I want to leave you with a few exercises you could try at home. We've already seen some of these, already talked about some of these. So one from each stage. For the pre-fall stage, you could do walking while turning your head side to side. The near fall stage, you could do those big steps in all different directions. For the falling stage, you could sit on your bed and just practice rolling backwards while either protecting your head or slapping those arms out to the side. And then in the fall recovery, you could work on those transfers from laying on your back onto your side or onto your stomach, or a wall push-up, for example. So just to summarize, we do need to focus on both the falls prevention side of things and falls preparedness. If we address both categories, we can reduce the fear of falling and improve safety and independence. We want to be incorporating exercises for amplitude, big movements, strength, balance, cognition, speed, and hopefully some of those do involve getting down onto the floor to perform them. And lastly, getting down and up from the floor is a skill we want to practice so that we can maintain or work to regain that skill so that if we have a fall, it will be easier for us to get up. So thank you so much to Robin and PSSO for having me here today to teach all of you. I hope that you enjoyed and found this helpful. If you would like to contact me, you can do so with any of the methods here. If you want to try some exercises that will help kind of have this whole puzzle pieced together, you're welcome to contact me to try a free class of my Defy Parkinson's program. There's Zoom classes that run every Tuesday from 10 to 10:45, and we work on a lot of what we've talked about here today. So again, thank you for your time and attention.